Hi everybody. End of week 7 and first week on distributed cognition, which is always a kind of a weird week. So thank you first to Justin and Sarah for guiding us through this week, because both in terms of the discussion moderation and for your summary, which is really good, and thank you for that. I want to reiterate a couple of points actually from the summary, because I think these are really important issues that will go on following us as we go through the course. And the most significant one, I think, is thinking about cognition as a much broader concept than simply the stuff in one's head, so that instead it involves this interaction between individuals, artifacts, and activity. And that idea of activity as looking as a kind of holistic sort of way is very central to a currently popular theory called activity theory, which Engstrom is probably the best known kind of proponent of, and he's been working on expansions of this for the last sort of 10 years. So it's really quite a complex theory now, and you'll probably come across this in other courses. For us, in terms of looking at online learning environments, the reason why I think the whole distributed argument is important is because it places the technology as a tool in this as a functional part of the overall learning system, so or the learning network, if you like. And it suggests that we have to look at all parts of that learning system if we're going to understand these things. So the individual, the cultural context in Vygotsky's terms, so the kind of the general cultural development from social to internally psychological, and the tools, or the artifacts, and each plays a particular but interrelated role in the overall network of how learning proceeds, or when it doesn't. And one of the interesting things in activity theory, for instance, is that as you plot these different things that influence the learning in any given situation, you can identify tensions that exist, so problems that are going to stop the smooth interaction between, say, the individual and the tool. Well, if you can't have access to that tool because the lab is always locked, there's a tension there, and you're going to not be able to effectively continue that. So that's a sort of simple one, but the idea is that if you look at learning in this broader sort of way, you'll be able to identify, and in a different way, where problems may arise, because you're looking at the whole thing, and it really changes how we understand stuff. But these are very challenging and slippery concepts, and for example, and Eckhart was talking a bit about this week, and I tried to put a response to that, because it's true that not all social media use is necessarily an example of distributed cognition in the way that Hutchins uses that term. So, his example of flying is being distributed amongst the pilot and the plane and the, what do you call them, air traffic controllers. But so that really is a completely codependent system, in a sense that, if any one of those doesn't work, then you've got problems. In a sense, a lot of the way social media works is different, because there are multiple ways of us obtaining information at any given moment. So it's not as specifically reliant on one source, or in the same way that in Hutchins' examples. But so I think when we get into next week's look, though, this week's rather, with P and that idea of distributed intelligence, these lines kind of blur again, because all tools or artifacts, by P's reckoning, contain intelligence. And that intelligence comes from somebody else, right? Which in itself turn may have come from yet another person or multiple people. So when you use a tool, be it a book or an algorithm or a social media site, you're learning in part from the interaction with that tool, and it itself contains other people's knowledge. So that is part of the distributed intelligence in the system. So that's a much more broad example use of that term than Hutchins' use. But Hutchins' analysis was pivotal to us being able to break it out of that in the single mind kind of view of cognition. And it also supports the importance of the environment and social factors in learning. And that emphasis, we see, it keeps being echoed through Vygotsky, through Dewey, through Bruner, and Piaget in his own way. And that, continues to stay with us. But each time we look at it, it has a slightly different kind of take. So now we're going to go into the second week of this concept, and we'll look at some of the educational applications of these ideas in the Resnick and the P articles, and work with this sort of idea of distributed learning and distributed intelligence in what P kind of sees as the entirety of the learning system that is there for learning purposes. And Jessica and Peter and Lorelei are leading us through this current week's readings, and in their group of 3, and each of them is going to focus on moderating one question across the 3 groups, which is a brilliant idea, and I don't know why I haven't thought of it before. But this is a big class this year, so we don't often have as many groups of 3 as we are this year. But anyway, I think it may be I think it brings a kind of coherence, perhaps, to across the groups. So I think that's actually a good strategy for others, perhaps in the future. So good. And right now it's a lovely sunny day, and it's got little tiny white fluffy clouds high up, which belies the fact that they also told us it was going to rain later. So hopefully we will not be too inconvenienced by that, because it's absolutely lovely right now. Okay, have a good week. I'll talk to you soon.